Thank you, Deb. That was wonderful. And I hope that applause was for Deb, not me. So, yeah, you can applaud Deb. It's just remarkable. Thank you. Well, my name is Andy Nish. I am the medical director of the John Stoddard Cancer Center, and I'm also an integrative medicine physician and interventional radiologist. And I want to welcome all of you here today. This is a collaborative effort between Civic Music Association and Unity Point in Des Moines, John Stoddard Cancer Center, Mercy One Cancer Center, as well as Above and Beyond Cancer. And for the next 2 hours, we're going to be exploring the relationship between music and healing through the lens of musicians, composers, healthcare workers, patients, and non-traditional healers. I'm so happy you can join us for this 2-hour journey. Now, just to set you up a little bit about what's going to happen, for 2 hours, we've got a mix of different things going on. We're going to have 2 panel discussions with our musicians, composers, and then the second panel discussion will be with a music therapist and a patient. We'll also have a question and answer session where you can answer questions or ask questions and have them answered by our panelists. And then we're going to have more music. So I don't want you to miss the more music. Deb Jennings will be out here again with her crystal bowls. Judy Olsen will be out here with her Native American flute. And then we'll have the honor and pleasure of hearing Brooklyn Ryder play a short piece from Beethoven. So that's the day's events. This has been a remarkable journey. We had planned this 2 years ago, and I was just thinking about this morning. 2 years ago, in February, we were trying to plan what we were going to do in collaboration with our healthcare and Brooklyn Ryder, giving the title of the program, Healing Modes. And of course, COVID happened. And it didn't happen. But I remember in early February, Dick Deming from Mercy One Cancer Center, myself, and some representatives from Civic Music were to have a meeting. We were going to plan this. So we had a recent snow, and I'm out in the woods snowshoeing. Completely forgot about the meeting. And all of a sudden, my phone rings. It's Dick. Are you coming to the meeting? Like, oh, dear. No, but I'll park myself by a tree and we can meet. So we talked about this. We kind of conceptualized this, and then it didn't happen. 2021 didn't happen. We're still dealing with COVID. So this has been a remarkable journey getting here today, and I think that this journey is really going to accentuate the beauty of music and how it can truly heal us in a spiritual, emotional, mental health, and physical way. So I know we're all really excited to be here. We're not going to, I look at this as from the lens of a physician, right? It's all about molecules. It's all about pathways. It's all about neural pathways. And we're not going to look at it that way at all, because I'm very, very curious as to how our panelists, our musicians and composers, really look at music as a healing art. So stay tuned, because here we go. So on our panel today, we have our first panelists, our 3 panelists. Our first one is Nicholas Cords. And Nicholas is a violist for Brooklyn Ryder. And he's flew from Boston today, where he said there's an ice storm and flights were canceled. So he was part of the travel racket today. And then our second panelist this morning is Colin Jacobson. And Colin resides in New York now. And you were one of the founders of Brooklyn Ryder. You too. So thank you, Colin. And then our third panelist today is Brian Coyle. And Brian is new to us. He's our new executive director for Civic Music. And he comes through us through a background of multiple talents. He's a composer. He's a musician. He plays jazz trumpet. He's an educator. He was at Hope College for a number of years in their education department. And he is now the executive director of Civic Music. So we want to introduce Brian, and he's going to have some things to say in our panel discussion today as well. All right. Let's kick it off with some questions. And I will tell you, they did not know these questions. You know, these are not pre-rehearsed. So I'm pulling these right out from my brain today, and hopefully we'll have good answers. So I guess the first obvious question is, what's the inspiration for healing modes? And is that inspiration connected to personal stories or just the universal story of music and its ability to heal?
Well, I'll jump in.
Jump in.
And I think your audience will soon see that our responses were not pre-ordained either. So we can all just be in the moment together, which ultimately I think is what the performance of live music really is all about, is bringing a community of people together around an idea. And I think sometimes, if we're in our busy lives, if we're going to call upon people to come together around something, I think in the way that we program and think about the concert experience, we want that to be around something meaningful, something that might have a chance for living on in the memory past the concert experience, something that might actually, might inspire further action or thought or movement in an individual audience member afterwards. And so we always try to program with that in mind, and it just seemed, for a project, this is a few years ago, to think about healing and music actually seemed like a really ripe topic. This is the idea of music and healing is not a new one. I mean, I think you can go back to the most ancient forms of music and then on to the Greeks and et cetera, et cetera. You see this represented at all junctures and in many, many, many different world cultures. But of course, in the world of the string quartet, you need look no further than the world of late Beethoven to find a composer who was thinking rather intensively about music and healing and spirituality and creativity and the health of the body, and represented it through this great string quartet, Opus 132. But we always want to bring a kind of contemporary voice or voices to the table, so we wanted to commission 5 composers overall in this project. All 5 of them happen to be women, just to contribute their stories about healing in music, perhaps a story of personal healing, a story of something in society that they feel is screaming out for the need of healing or conversation. And so that was the genesis of the Healing Modes project. Yeah. I would say also, just by extension, like this extension of what is happening, we're literally on the concert stage where we will play tonight, but the idea of having a discussion and panel is just a beautiful sort of way of expanding the experience, as I was talking about before. And I just want to applaud this community and series for setting up such an event.
Yeah, I mean, I could jump in. I think the idea of healing in music for each of the musicians in Brooklyn Rider probably has its own genesis, because all of us, I think being musicians, there's such that mix of the physical attachment to playing one's instrument and literally that attachment of the vibrations that I feel like if a day goes by and I don't play, I'm missing that, and that's built over many years. And then it's, in terms of memories, you do feel like music encodes memories. And so you by playing this program and this album, which in its conception, we started talking about it in 2016, it's, as you mentioned, the world has changed several times over since we started playing that Beethoven quartet and these 5 commissions. And I think always we feel that it's a great thing of being in a quartet and getting to repeat repertoire and feel it in front of different audiences and how it lives and breathes differently in different spaces. But you are aware of how it relates to a wider world around you, and the music literally sounds different, and this project takes on a different resonance because of what we've all collectively gone through, so yeah.
So that kind of leads me to another question. As you play this music in the context of the title Healing Modes, does that music feel different in your soul as opposed to just playing another concert?
This Beethoven quartet that is part of this project is definitely what we would call a desert island piece of music that for years we were in love with and really wanted to play. And I think, though, putting it alongside these 5 new works from very different backgrounds is just illuminates it also. And I think it just, every time we play these pieces, the Beethoven and the new commissions, they do resonate differently in the soul, and that is, I think, a product of, the thing about music, as Nick says, is it really brings your attention to the moment, and so you're very aware of your internal state of mind, and that's the great thing about then its communal aspect, and I'm in dangerous territory if I start spouting off scientific facts, but I do know that one of the things that we as musicians dealt with, because, with COVID, you can't really work from home as a musician. I mean, there's certain kinds of works. You can write music at home, but in terms of what is at the core of it, which is the live experience in front of audience, though it was amazing that we have Zoom and we have all these virtual concerts over the last couple of years, I have read articles saying that the witnessing music in community together does light up more parts of the brain than when you're doing it on a flat surface at home. So we are grateful that we're back doing this in front of people.
That is scientifically accurate.
Okay.
It's really interesting. I mean, there's been studies about that. And so music has, one level of depth, but music live is different than music on a screen. It's on a screen, it's 2-dimensional. Live, it's 3-dimensional. And, our brain processes music in a very, very complex way, and it becomes even more complex live. So
there's this episode of Beethoven, and it might relate to this idea of healing and how he felt about the power of live music in the room and the vibration of a student of his whose son had passed away, and she had become rather offended that Beethoven didn't attend the funeral or come to visit her. He finally did, and his only words to her upon entering the room were, "Now we will speak in tones." And he improvised on the piano for an hour, in front of her. And I think that just points to this belief in the healing power of music that Beethoven surely held, and a kind of belief that could be more powerful for him than any words that he could actually, or action that he could put together. And I think, essentially a concert is not a fixed, you might, see a string quartet concert and hopefully it's reasonably well prepared and, all the things that you might expect out of a quartet, but actually essentially it is an improvisation in a moment through the vehicle of a score, for instance, of a Beethoven or a new composer. So actually what's happening in the concert really is being done and created and sent out as resonance in the moment, and everybody in the room is part of that because everybody literally is affecting the way that sound is being reverberated in the space.
It's a 2-way energetic exchange, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, as musicians, I'm not a musician, okay? Not a musician at all. I live with one. And, you can tell when there's energy in the audience, there's energy in the performers, right? So there's an energetic exchange, which scientifically we really can't measure. So when we can't measure it, it doesn't exist, right? Not right. So another question. So this project started pre-COVID, 2016, somewhere in that vicinity. And now we've been through COVID. How has the pandemic changed what healing modes means to you and the world in general?
That is a good question. I guess one thought I had recently, and this is going back to Beethoven, is the cathartic power of music, and it's demonstrated in that story Nick had. But I think one thing we talk about in terms of this particular piece and the movement that's at the centerpiece that we will play for all of you later, the Holy Song of Thanksgiving from a Convalescent to the Deity in the Lydian Mode, which is a mouthful to remember and
You want to explain that to us?
Well,
I love that song.
well, literally that idea of the healing modes, the name of the project comes from that. And the Lydian mode is a particular scale that maybe in recent times is most famous with Bernstein's song Maria from West Side Story is in that mode. But it's a scale, da 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 da, and it has this. It's ascribed healing powers from ancient music theorists, and whether I don't know if that is something that can be scientifically measured yet, like a scale. Does it have this particular effect, or if we veer off into pseudoscience properties, but it definitely has a calming effect. When I hear that scale, I feel myself in a different state of mind. And I think that can be measured, as far as I know, that music can produce a different state of mind in another human being through its performance. And so I think in terms of the cathartic power in that movement, Beethoven has recently recovered from a life-threatening illness. And in the music, it has a one section juxtaposed with another, and one is very chorale-like and sort of has a church hymn-like quality. Then there's a section that he says feeling new life, and that's you can literally, it feels programmatic, Beethoven coming back to life. Nick likes to talk about how that for Beethoven was the more important part of this story, was not just physically getting better, but the ability to be creative and have life force again, or soul, or whatever we want to call that. And so I think in terms of the pandemic, my thought has gone to, okay, the brilliance of science to come up with vaccines that can protect us, and all the measures that we take to keep each other safe, et cetera. But I think the pause or weird thing that the collective trauma we've gone through has said on an individual and societal level to so many people, well, what are we returning to? Or what is this new life where are we going to go from here? And it just has brought up so many questions. So I feel when we play this piece, that is somewhere in the back of my head at this point.
So it's really changed how you think about the piece.
Right.
Yeah. Nicholas?
Well, I mean, ditto.
Ditto.
And there's just maybe very simply just the idea of the enduring power of music. It's just, in this time especially, and you put that in front of an audience, you somewhere in the back of your mind, well, it's like, oh, audiences in the 19th century were hearing this. Audiences around the influenza pandemic in 1918 were hearing this music. Was present at all points along the way during lots of stories of great difficulty, in a way. But then Beethoven is also, one of the great things about these late quartets is pointing to a very old world. You mentioned the old church modes and the ideas. So we get this sort of eternal feeling between the live moment, which we've already talked about, but also just the encompassing of history and people and events over time, and just it gives it sort of enduring strength to actually partake in this music at this time. And I feel like a kind of renewed sense of what that means in this particular art form at this time.
Okay, thank you. Brian, I have a question. I know you've composed music, so you're a composer. Colin has composed music. Nicholas has composed music. So if you were asked to compose a piece through the lens of healing, how does that change how you think and actually compose that piece?
Wow. I would like to hear our guests' response. It's a fascinating thing. I mean, the act of composition is an interesting thing. It's a conundrum in a way. It's in many ways it's the most it's done in solitude. but the ultimate goal of it is to put it out there and for people to listen to it and connect with other human beings. So it's this strange act, I find, and I'd love to hear your take on it. So coming through the challenges we've all, as has been so articulately stated here, of COVID and all the various crises we've had in the years leading up to COVID, and how the power of that music has been able to be manifested by so many different composers and in their own unique way. It's a fascinating thing. It's a question I'd love to hear your response on, Nicholas and Colin, because it's something that is so personal, and when you kind of think about doing that, it would come out in a lot of different ways. I'd love to get a conversation going. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the good lens for us is the 5 people who wrote pieces for this project, and the prompt we gave them was that open. It was, think about healing in music and what that means to you while you're writing this piece. And I think, like, from my sense of it, none of the pieces set out to do on a physiological basis what maybe Deb was thinking about with bowls, and when there's music therapy, there is like a specific, therapeutic goal. I think the pieces we got, none of the composers went that direction, though they could have, I suppose, thought about how this would affect an audience. I think more they were engaged in the world of ideas behind what that meant in terms of both personally. Some of the composers wrote about an experience they had of sickness and of healing, and literally in the piece that we're playing tonight, one of them, Rina Esmail, is called Poison or Zeher, and you hear in the piece a sense of there being something difficult or poisonous, and then that sort of seeping out or leaching out by the end and coming to a new place. So it's almost like that idea of how she was really sick, and she's a vocalist, and she had a really bad case of strep that rendered her unable to sing for quite some time, and I think that idea of being voiceless was frightening. So in this piece, you feel programmatically that work itself out. But the composers really took it as a societal thing, like looking at Caroline Shaw, who we're playing tonight as well, wrote a piece in which she was thinking of the Syrian refugee crisis, in particularly the Greek Isles, and where many refugees have sought refuge on some of those Greek islands. And so in that piece, she's thinking, the piece's title is Schisma, or a cleft in the rock, and I guess that is a reference to a passage from the Bible in which there's a sense of refuge. So she, in a way, she's identifying something that is in need of healing, and in a way that her and one other composer who we're not playing here, but Matana Roberts, wrote a piece where she was thinking of the difficulty around the border with Mexico and the U.S. and as a thing that's in need of healing, and so I think the idea that part of healing is finding out what is wrong and identifying that and airing stuff around it would be an important part that I suppose any doctor has to do on an individual basis. But like COVID, it's like such a thing of what is best for the individual and what is best for society. And sometimes they overlap and sometimes not, I think, is a difficult thing that we're dealing with.
Maybe that's just good to underscore in this question of there's the lens of thinking about healing as you approach the creative process of writing a piece of music, but just to underscore that there's always a relationship with an audience there. And so later in this panel you have music therapist and patient, and similarly in the audience you have the composer who is thinking about this and writing through the lens of healing. You have the performer who is actually interpreting whatever that score is through their own experience, individually and collectively. But then I think one of the most important parts of that whole ecosystem is actually what an audience does, actually, which is so important. You might have a score fixed in time, it could be a very old score, but it's always anew when it's in front of the ears of an audience. So to me, like that's always a part of that, triangle.
Yeah, thank you. Brian, did you?
No,
Okay. So I guess the ultimate question for all of you is, as musicians, how do you find music to be healing in your own lives? Is it through the creative process? Is it through the composing process? Is it through the playing process? How do you use music other than what you play to feel well in your lives?
Very good question.
I'll just jump in and I just anecdotally, I can't count the number of people, you're talking about live performances that you were talking about coming back to performing live. I've lost count of the number of people who have finally made it to live performance and said they just burst into tears at the sound of the first strike of the note, of a symphony or of even a rock band, because it's just like there's been this pent up energy inside of them that music just all of a sudden released. So being able to make community again, whether it's as a performer or as a composer, having your music performed live again, for me, has just been just a gift, that wouldn't say took for granted, but if anything that this has shown is it's how much I really appreciate having my music played or having playing music in front of people and playing with my friends and colleagues. You all have such an amazing bond as musicians. I imagine that was torn away for a period of time, must have been incredibly difficult to not have that connection.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there were a lot of groups that did engage in the sort of remote recording projects where one person records their part, then another, and you make the videos and put them together in the Brady Bunch, which was a way to do stuff early on, and there was some wonderful experimentation along those lines. For us, we didn't do that much because with the string, at least for our view of a string quartet, it really is so essential, the way, the vibrations, literally the physical sense of connection that is, you talked about triangulation. I think there's a way when you're playing, say, just a simple chord progression, when things are really resonating beautifully and in tune, there's something that happens that is beyond those four people. It sounds like there's another one in the room, or there are more than four people there, and you can't get that through the remote experience, So we were silent for a while, and then finally we were able to get together and do some recording for remote, for live streams and stuff, but we did it together in the room, and that was very important to us. Yeah, I don't know. On a personal level, I think I mentioned this earlier. I mean, there's the physical act of playing, and I think just that goes to the vibrations themselves of the instrument that is your voice, and almost you speak more truthfully through that instrument than you do with words or whatever. So, and then the ability to find your voice within a collection of three other strong-willed individuals and make that work, I think, is the work of a string quartet. And we see ourselves as individuals and against and with and in harmony with others is the joy of being in a string quartet, really.
And I would just say two quick things in response to that question. Two is, this seems overly simplistic. It is, actually. I just love music so much, but it's such an infinite vessel. You through music, through the sensory lens of music, you can see the world really and sort of experience it really incredibly fully. It holds stories. It holds what's most precious about a culture. It holds human experience. So that's just one thing, just the incredible lens that's there. But also, for me, I'm not a religious person per se, but actually music comes with it a whole set of ritual and practice and discipline, and sort of like it becomes, in a way, as a practitioner, player of music myself, it becomes the measuring stick of your life, in a way, and like those things, those steps that you have to go through each day to sort of land where you want to, and that you never land in that place, but actually it's the ritual of constantly striving for that place that actually offers so much, healing in my life.
So let's ask the converse question here. Now that you've said, one of the things that was important was getting back together, did you feel physically, emotionally, mentally different when you couldn't play together?
I mean, yes, there was an existential question around what's the rest of our lives going to look like? And I think, we were talking about this, even though we're here and this is real, there's a sense of what is real, what is certain. There's a book by Myra Kalman, a wonderful illustrator who does a lot of, New Yorker magazine covers called The Principles of Uncertainty. I guess, we were always operating, it's part of being a human being and part of life, but we just learned that lesson a lot in a stronger way. So, I guess there's a feeling that remains, for me at least, that, and I felt this amongst audience members and musicians, both within the quartet and other projects, just a real commitment to this idea of the moment is precious and let's not take it for granted ever again. Of course, it's also human nature to take things for granted, so we probably will eventually, but that's where I am right now.
And, for sure, there were moments there that got very dark. But not to, dwell there, I think, would be to actually flip that on its side and what the silver linings were. And, actually to have a second to step back. And I think maybe all of us have experienced this to a degree. It's actually does result in this sort of reprioritization and this sort of being in touch with what is really essential about what you do and what you love to do. And maybe it's, it's a focusing of one's efforts, in a certain way. So as much as there was a dark side, there that actually produced, and I see this, I teach at New England Conservatory viola and chamber music, and I could see that in the generation of current students there, a real kind of despair about not being in a musician community, but also just the sense of existential, can I be a musician in this world, and just to sort of see, music and live performance was one of the first things that felt the immediate effect, and it's often one of the last things to kind of come back, in a way. So that produced a lot of, but I think what happens out of these moments is you get a kind of renewed strength, a new interest, and a new sort of imaginative mindset towards how to think about the performance and the presentation and the creation of music for the next generation. So I think there are, hopefully golden days ahead of us.
So good is coming out of the pandemic.
I think so.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. You talked about uncertainty, and as a human species, we don't do well with uncertainty, do we? We're always worried about the future, what's going to happen. And I think you touched on it earlier. Music really brings to the point the present moment. And if we can live in the present moment, then we are really free of a lot of worry and consternation. And I think that's one thing music brings. And from a scientific aspect, it allows us to bring in what we call the relaxation response. Our heart rate lowers, our respiratory rate lowers, our blood pressure lowers, and we just feel better. So there's a great correlate, we can get into the science of it ad nauseum, but it's so important. And what really interested me, and you've touched on this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. When I looked at the bios of the commissioned pieces, it was just fascinating how those pieces the creative juices were stimulated by adversity in those people's lives. Particularly the Poison, she lost her voice, she struggled with that. What is it about adversity that stimulates creativity?
I guess as a species, maybe we are problem solvers. We I feel like we create problems for ourselves when there are none because we like problems.
Yes, we do.
So obviously that's pretty deeply rooted, but I think that's a survival mindset perhaps, is that if we don't have problems, we need to practice problem solving when there is a problem, you know? So it's, yeah.
I mean, for sure, like it's experience is reflected, you know, in the music, you know, somehow. And I think you have to live life incredibly fully, I think, to be a great creator of music. And you hear that represented by a composer like Debussy, you know, who said, I'm paraphrasing something and butchering it in the process, but, you know, music should smell of the field and not of lamp oil. You know, and then, but a musician like Miles Davis said something, you know, similar to, I'm also butchering this, but you can't play what you don't experience, you know, and so I think this is a wisdom that I think virtually every generation of musician throughout the ages probably agrees on in some degree.
And Miles had a lot of pharmacologic experience.
Yeah, we could talk about Miles for a long time. But, I mean, you know, coming from someone from the jazz world primarily, I mean, the blues, right? It's about dealing with the here and now, dealing with what has happened to you in many ways the most simplest of forms, right? And the blues can be one note, you know, you can use that kind of drone and create above it. But that is the manifestation of life and working things out through that genre and through that form. And of course, from that has come, you know, a myriad of other forms and other styles of music. So, yeah, adversity, that's, we're dealing.
Yes, we are, and we're creative. We're human species. You know what? Our time is up, and we could go on for probably hours with this. But I so appreciate all of your insights into answering the questions, and hopefully the audience has learned something. And you know, we'll be bringing you back for a question and answer in a little bit. But thank you very much for your time and insights into music.
Thank you.
All right, fascinating stuff. It's amazing how just creating music is so healing. And we've seen that in the pieces that have been commissioned in Beethoven. So we mentioned Beethoven had a life-threatening illness. He had what we'd probably call today colitis. And he was so grateful that he recovered. He composed this amazing music. So next, I'd like to introduce my colleague from Mercy One, medical director of the Mercy One Cancer Center, philanthropist, compassionate human being, friend, colleague, Dr. Richard Deming. All right, thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Andy. Am I on? There we go.
You are on.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, so if Andy and I weren't here right now, we'd probably just be finishing up the Burr ride. We might be having a beverage in Perry or
Something like that.
something like
Yeah.
that. But it's great to be here. What a great conversation you just had.
You know, it was fabulous, you know, picking the brains of, I mean, I want people to understand those people on stage are world-class musicians. They've been everywhere in the world. You know, when you look at their bios, and I wasn't going to go through their bios because that would have taken probably 2 hours, but the words are Juilliard, Curtis School of Music, New England Conservatory, Royal Academy. These guys are the best. And so I want you to recognize that, because here we are in Des Moines, Iowa. We're not in New York City. We're not in San Francisco. And we have some of the best musicians at their craft right here. So it's remarkable.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. And I come here with a pedigree of South Dakota State University. So
Excellent.
yes.
Good.
Jackrabbits, go Jackrabbits. But, you know, I love bringing together, obviously, the musicians and just listening to them talk about the role of music in life and in healing. And now we're going to transition to talking not just universally about the healing aspect of music, but very specifically about the role of bringing music into the medical setting, specifically for healing. So I'm a cancer doc. We spend a lot of time in college and medical school learning about this.
Wait. I got my degree online. Took a
Oh, did you?
year.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. You spent too much time.
But we spend a whole lot of time, on the anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and as an oncologist, we spend a lot of time learning about how to kill cancer cells, how to surgically remove them, how to irradiate them, how to kill them with poisons. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about the role of the humanities. And what I'm really interested in is as a doctor taking care of a patient, it's a human being taking care of another human being. And that's the humanities. And over time, from Hippocrates on, there's been this understanding that the humanities, whether it's music, poetry, visual arts, has a role to play in healing. And I like where we're going to transition now from kind of the general healing power of music for all of us to more specifically, how do we bring music into a medical center to help with healing?
Yeah. And I just want to say, Dick has championed bringing the humanities and arts into cancer care. He's kind of dragging me along. I'm a little late to the game, but I'm learning. But I really am proud to call him my friend and my colleague because he's done so much for how we take care of people. So thank you.
Ditto. And I'm glad we're not asked to perform music up here today.
Ooh, that could be brutal. I can play crystal bowls, though.
So, let's introduce our panel.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to start off. So Bob Schleter. Bob is from Des Moines and was educated in music at the University of Iowa and the Brooklyn College of Music. So we've got a connection with our Brooklyn writers.
Berkeley College of Music.
Brooklyn College
Berkeley
of
College
Music.
of Music.
Yes, what did I say?
Brooklyn, but that's okay.
Okay. And we also have another connection. Bob lived in California, so did I, for a few years, but he was there for over 30 years. He is a composer and lyricist. He's a professional musician as a performer, and he's a music teacher. And if that doesn't give him enough credentials to sit at this table, he's also a cancer survivor and a patient of mine. And we're just very pleased that you're here, Bob, and we're going to pick your brain about all of those things. Mm-hmm. And Andy, you're going to introduce our next guest.
I'm going to introduce Kelly Ray. So Kelly Ray Powell is a certified music therapist. She's also a licensed mental health counselor. And Kelly Ray studied at New York University in their prestigious School for Music Therapy. She's originally from Ankeny, Iowa. She circuitously made it back here. She's worked with our children in the blank Children's Hospital, on the blank wards, and she currently works with us on our inpatient cancer ward on Powell 3, providing music therapy to our inpatients. She's also a musician. She has a folk band, and they've toured internationally, I understand. Yeah. So welcome, Kelly. It's so great to have you here, and we are all anxious to learn more about what is music therapy. So, Dick, go ahead and...
Yeah, and one thing I kind of want to put in context, and we can use different terms, but I think at the table we have two different concepts. One is music therapy as a certified, credentialed discipline, and we have music as therapy. And maybe I'll start with that, because here's the distinction. I think music can be therapeutic even if it's not done by a licensed music therapist.
Absolutely.
So, so maybe, Bob, you are a musician and you're a cancer survivor, and we happened to have an hour-long discussion a few weeks ago about the role that music as therapy can play in one's life. Part of it might be, the tapping into creativity. Part might be the anatomy and physiology of the rhythm and the music, and part might be the performing. How would you take the concept of music as therapy and apply it to your life?
Sure. First of all, let me say how much of a fan I am of Dr. Deming. When he asked me to do this, a month ago or 6 weeks ago, I said yes immediately. And that enabled me to just kind of think through these things and really, understand and explore things that I really hadn't thought of consciously. They were just things I had done my whole life. So I have sort of come down to think that there's 4 ways that this happens, music as therapy. And they're all important. The first one is just individually. I spent a lot of time in the pandemic working on music by myself. And there's a spiritual component to that. It's the monkey mind is silenced through this process. And that alone, I think, is healing. The second part is when you have, found some ideas of your own, then the collaboration with another person. And this is something that I've just thrived over the years. It could be, that you're doing, my background is more in the world of popular music, jazz, soul, rhythm and blues, modern musical theater. So those collaborations are oftentimes with other people in a band situation where you're doing a cover song or somebody has an original idea. But that's to me, that's the second level of it, is collaborating with other musicians. And there's a give and take with that's really special when you find the right people, right? The third level, and I think this changes everything, is when you play that music in front of an audience. It could be an audience of one. When Dr. Deming first asked me to do this, I called, Zoomed with four or five friends that had different experiences, and one of them regularly plays in front of tens of thousands of people, and we talked about that experience a little bit. That the loop that happens when you play for an audience is incredible. He describes it as a weightless feeling. You have this music that you've found through some kind of exploration. You collaborated with other people, and then to play it for somebody else, again, on a small scale or a big scale, it opens up and changes everything. And then the fourth level is that implies that there's a receiver of this, right? There's the band or the singer or whatever who's playing it, but it has to be received by somebody. And in this process, I think it's amplified. It's received. That person, and I was overhearing this, really intelligent commentary before us. This is all about live music. You can do this in recordings, obviously, but there's something special about that live experience, that the immediacy of the live experience, that is received in the audience, taken in and given back to the performer, who then feels bigger, and they give it back bigger, and it just grows. And I can tell you from my experience, this is a wonderful place to be in, and I think it's really what drives most musicians is to find that experience where your thoughts, your everyday thoughts are gone, and you just rise above it. And I don't know any more healing, that we can do ourselves than that.
So Bob, I'm going to interrupt for a second, and I want you to get a little more real with another aspect of this. So you've been diagnosed with a potentially lethal disease. How has your relationship with music changed, or how has music affected you and had perhaps the power to heal as you are facing your cancer journey?
I think two ways primarily. I was living large in New Orleans when the pandemic, just before the pandemic hit. And I went in to have my PSA checked, a prostate cancer marker, and it was through the roof. And it was time to really move toward whatever all the alarms were going off. So I went to went through some procedures, et cetera. But I ended up back here, and the pandemic has hit. So here I am with prostate cancer that's blown up, and the pandemic hits, and everything about my life is changed. So what am I going to do? Well, music, of course. I mean, there wasn't even a question. So I set about first I made a little album by myself. I call it solo duets. I played one guitar part and then I played another part. It was really fun. I went through all kinds of different styles and so on. And then I started doing collaborations with people, like my son included, people on Zoom, people in New York, people in Madison, Wisconsin, people in California. And meanwhile, I've had a collaborative partner for almost 40 years now, and we've been working on a musical that's, I think, really timely and important. So I really threw myself into that. So to answer your question specifically, in the immediate shadow of all this, it gave me something to throw myself into 100%.
Was it just a diversion, or was the music a source of healing?
Well, I think it was both. I think I would look for a word other than diversion. It allowed me to tune into that channel rather than the channel of, oh my God, I'm going to die. My bones are falling apart. And the other thing I would tag onto that and try to make clear is that it gave me the present opportunity to have something to really throw myself into. And I'm very much aware of how my vision of what I want to do with that I'm not done. So there's a future, and I know there's an issue with living in the future. That's not what I'm saying. My point is that I have a goal. My dad, who's a wit, an Iowa, Minnesota wit, used to talk about when he was diagnosed with heart disease that he had to stop buying the green bananas, right? Because they wouldn't have time to ripen by the time he would eat them. And that's the way I feel about music. I can buy the greenest of bananas because I intend to be around to finish that. Back to your question then, it was not a diversion as much as just a place to focus, but also, and the one word, and I thought this was just such intelligent commentary before us, the one word I didn't hear, and I could have missed it, is vibration. I think that there's something about the vibration aspect of music that is extremely healing. And that's what we work with, right? We manipulate vibrations. And I think that part of it is something. I think there's much more that I haven't explored yet, and I know that's part of what music therapy is about.
And let's transition to Kelly. So Kelly, I've been listening. You're a certified music therapist. Maybe for the audience who doesn't know, explain a little bit more what is a certified credentialed music therapist, and then I'd be interested in your take on the conversations that you've heard today.
Absolutely. So a music therapist obviously uses music as an intervention with a treatment plan. That's really what sets the music therapist apart from the volunteer musician who comes. Music is not owned by music therapists, of course. It's a human activity. Well, and even the animals make music, right? My dog was singing the other day when he was forlorn. But it's almost like a way of being alive. So, of course, I wouldn't say only music therapists can make music happen in healing. We just come in with a treatment plan, right? We have goals, and we use music specifically in different musical interventions, such as songwriting, just the experience of drumming, meditative music. I lead clients on music-assisted relaxation meditations. It really depends on what the human being you're meeting, what is going to help facilitate what their struggle is. So I never know exactly what is going to happen when I enter a hospital room or meet with a patient, but they will let me know. Is it pain management? Is it management of anxiety? So yeah, I guess it's the treatment plan that would set us apart. Because we're credentialed professionals, we attended approved programs by the American Music Therapy Association. So we're coming in with obviously some music education, some psychology education, and a little bit of medicine.
I have a question for Kelly. So, we in our Western medical model, think of healing as something physical. But at least I've discovered, I know Dick's been doing this for a long time, healing is at many, many different levels, a spiritual level, an emotional level, mental health level. And we were all involved in a little Iowa Public Radio interview the other day. And I was really, really taken by your story of how music can actually heal at a relational or a relationship level. And I would wonder, could you tell that story, please? I think that story is so impactful and maybe different than what we think.
It's a wonderful story because it illustrates not even just multiple ways music can support not just the patient, but their family members and the staff. And because music is so universal, it can touch us whether we're a world-class violinist like Colin Jacobson, or if we like to play the ukulele and write songs, or if we're a baby. Whatever our abilities are, whatever our age is, we can all connect with music. The story I think Andy's talking about is when I met a client who had just recently been diagnosed. And she was 7, and she was with her mom and her dad and a grandparent. And they had just gotten all of this information, and it was kind of hitting them. And that's when I was sent into the room just to kind of help them pass the time while they were waiting for the next caregiver to arrive with instructions for what was going to happen next, but also just to kind of help them manage all of this information and be together. The child was very shy and was not expressing verbally what she was experiencing. So we know with trauma, sometimes if we're just able to identify what feeling we're experiencing and then talking about that, that can ameliorate trauma, that can prevent PTSD down the road if you're just able to say, this is what's happening, and look at it and ascribe meaning to it on your own. So I see that this child probably needs to express what's happening. And I also know by, a blanket she had or a doll, I can't remember. It was a Elsa doll from the movie Frozen, which many people are familiar with. And I had a ukulele with me, which is very small, and it's unobtrusive, and it's fun. It has 4 strings, and she could reach out and strum the ukulele, and I could hold the chords for her and begin to sing that song. I noticed in the singing of the song that she began to have tears in her eyes, and I thought, okay, here comes some expression. This is great. What a great opportunity. So I changed the lyrics of the song to reflect what I saw as going on in the room. You can let it go. It's okay to let it go. You don't have to carry this alone. Meanwhile, she's strumming. Your mother's here. Grandma's here. You are not alone. And in just this little strumming of the ukulele, in the singing of what was happening in the room, the family just became physically closer. They moved in close to the child. Everyone began to cry, which is good for everybody's health. So what began as a room filled with fear and reticence and silence became a room with everyone singing a song together and knowing that they were connected and that they were resilient, that no matter what happened, that they would go through it together. And that's what's amazing about music, is you can be there for anybody who's within earshot. Everybody can be impacted and healed.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. You know, you think of the difference between an intense psychotherapist, so it's all intellectualizing, and just the empathy and sympathy and compassion that comes from just being present.
It's just another way to process. Not all processing needs to be verbal. So psychotherapy and, speaking out, counseling, these are all important tools, but sometimes trauma happens before we have verbal expression. Sometimes we need to express things that aren't something that we put words to, and we can do that with music. It's another language that we have available to us.
Bob, I am curious about the role that creativity plays, and probably a combination of creativity and reflection, and how music allows you to reflect on your life and or use your creativity, and how that, what role that plays in well-being and healing.
So I have a couple thoughts about that. One, I credit another friend that I talked to, interviewed about the subject, and he would put it this way, that creativity is, it's a form of pure spirit, okay? So I know people would define spirit in many different ways, but that works for me, that I'm in touch with something that's bigger than me. The second thing is that the other word that I think should be in this discussion is mindset. And I think to have a creative mindset is to say that I can solve problems, right? So part of my creativity, and I worked with kids that their creativity, it's over the top of this roof. Mine is this tall. Theirs is like, you can't even see the top. So I was given some of the gifts. I've seen people with extraordinary gifts, but in all cases, it comes with a mindset of I can do this. It comes from a mindset of being able to improvise your way through a situation. So I think that mindset has been hugely important to me. There's been some dark days, but for the most part, my mindset is that I can navigate this and get to the next point, and I feel like I'm gonna win ultimately. So creativity. And another thing I would throw out there, and these are sort of random thoughts, but I think a lot of people deny their creativity. They don't see that they have it, and I think that's they should just explore some different areas. And I've had students as young as 6. I've had students that were 83. I had a blind student. I had a deaf student, a deaf guitar student. Imagine that. Before I really teaching in the classroom, I had a deaf guitar student. He came in, tuned his guitar, first thing. I was like, he was really good at reading lips. I said, how did you do that? He said, I feel the vibrations. So that kind of mindset, I think, goes a long way in happiness, and happiness goes a long way in healing, and creativity is bound up in that in some wonderful way.
Great.
It makes me think of Maslow, like talking about, like from a psychological standpoint, we have a hierarchy of needs, right? And so at the bases, we need food, we need shelter, but then there are these peak experiences wherein we are wholly human, and music provides peak experiences.
Kelly, can you talk about the difference, or how you use both playing of music where the patient is receptively listening versus the role of actively engaging in drumming or strumming or creating music? Where would one situation be more relevant in the medical setting versus the other?
Well, sometimes my clients can talk to me and tell me what they need, and sometimes they cannot. They have an apparatus on them, or they're feeling stressed about various tubes, or it's unsure how much they're aware of in the space. And I do know at end of life, I'm in the room a lot. So, and hearing is one of the last things to go when we're transitioning. So it's not always clear. I'm not always 100% clear that I'm being heard. But in my training, I'm looking for breath rate, heart rate. I'm also looking for no. I'm looking for consent. I don't just barge in with drums. I, get a sense of the space. With pediatric patients who are not able to communicate with me, often I can talk to their parents. What does your child love? And then I can just deliver that. And if I'm watching the heart rate, keeping a close eye on that, and also looking at the parent, I can tell if what I'm doing is supportive or not. But yeah, it's interesting. I've played for clients when I was an intern who I wasn't sure if they knew I was in the room or not. But then through the course of their treatment, and I would usually be gentle with that type of music too. And if I'm seeing big changes in heart rate, I slow down or speed up. You never know what somebody is going to be interested in or attracted to. But I've had clients who I've said, "Hi, do you know me? I've played for you before." And they said, "Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, I was very lonely. It's very lonely not being spoken to. And I looked forward to you coming to play." And I had no idea. I don't always know what my impact is. I'm always looking for consent because not everybody is ready for music, and that's okay. Silence in music is just as important as the music, so that needs to be respected as well. I'm following the client's lead.
And you mentioned that obviously if you're in a room where there's a monitor, you can see the heart rate. I mean, we know the science that, and we can all feel it. So, for example, you're taking the garbage out at night, and all of a sudden a dog jumps out of the bushes and barks at you. I mean, we can feel instantly the physiology that is happening. The dog didn't touch you. How does what happens out there affect what's in here? Sort of the negative response is immediate, and we feel that. But the same physiologic response, Andy, you talked about the relaxation response, the lowering of the heart rate, the lowering of the breath rate, and changes that happen with blood pressure. Those things happen. They're physiologic. We can prove it. We don't feel it as much as immediately as the negative response. To what extent do you use that physiologic response to guide you in the music that you're providing, or in helping to determine what's going on in the room and how you interact with that particular patient?
It's interesting. I'll often choose the rhythm of the music that I play based on what I perceive as the breath rate of the people in the room. So if I'm entering a room, often a nurse is grabbing me and saying, "My patient is really scared. Can you come play some music?" So this is a person who's breathing high up in their body. They're feeling fear. So I match that rhythm. I bring them something that kind of matches them. And then throughout the session, I'll slow down in an almost imperceptible way. And I'll feel myself becoming more grounded. And usually that's a mutual thing that's happening, that we're all becoming just a little bit more grounded. And there's some relief that's happening. And that's just using the rhythm of the music. We can be regulated as human beings with just a regular rhythm can regulate us. We don't need beautiful music necessarily, or just bilateral stimulation is regulating. So I can use that trick, that tool, and then combine it with something that the client really loves and give them sometimes a peak experience, sometimes a very human moment in what can be a clinical, frightening, aesthetic place. They can exist as a person.
So Bob, as a musician and as an individual on a journey with cancer, how has your relationship to music changed, if at all, since you acquired your diagnosis and have been on this journey with cancer?
Well, I was first diagnosed in 2009. I don't know that I can say it's changed fundamentally. As I said, with the pandemic and the sort of more severity of my situation, it definitely, I was hearing you talk about adversity earlier, and my experience is that your choices are just sort of shut down. They just become more limited. So I chose to throw myself more into music. I would say, maybe I have more value. I place more value on it. I feel more appreciative of the fact that I was given, some gifts and that I developed them over time. One of the greatest things about being a teacher is that I'm in touch with, dozens of my students from the past over about 30 years in the classroom, and that's extremely life affirming. So yeah, that's off the top of my head. That's the best I can do. Is that I think my sense of appreciation has deepened. I've said for years I can't imagine my life without it, and that's especially true probably in the last 13 years now. On the other hand, I had somebody along the way said to me, "You can't just be a cancer patient." I was like, "Okay, got it. I get exactly what you mean there. That's a mindset. It's an outlook. I can't deny that that's part of my reality, but I don't live there. And fortunately, with music, I have in relationships and life in general. I can devote a lot of my energy to that and not worrying and making things worse."
So Andy, let me ask you a question and maybe open it up to everyone. So you and I both are directors of cancer centers. What's the role of bringing music into the cancer center? What would you as a music therapist like to see cancer centers develop? And what would you as a cancer survivor who goes to cancer centers for treatment, how would you like to see music integrated into professional healing?
Yeah. I'm going to limit this a little because we're out of time, but that's okay. Let's answer that question. As an integrative medicine physician, I look at music therapy as a tool in my toolbox. It's not exclusive, so any of the humanities and arts can be healing, whether it be visual art, auditory art, expressive art, writing. I want to have availability for all those things. And Kelly and I were talking earlier, music therapy isn't for everybody. I mean, we know that people who hear music, sometimes they induce seizures. So I want to have a multitude of choices for patients. And so I want to bring as much of that into the cancer center as I can to allow people to express themselves in whatever way works for them.
There are drama therapists, there are art therapists.
Movement.
There's a whole group of creative arts therapies, and it would be so lovely. If I could have whatever I wanted, there'd be a team of us serving the community.
Bob, you get the last word.
Sure.
How would you like to see traditional Western medicine change or incorporate more of music into the healing arts?
I would say two ways. I spent most of my adult life in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's a wonderful program there called Bread and Roses, which was putting music performance into all kinds of spaces where they wouldn't normally be. And I think that would be one thing, to bring in a wide variety of live music into that situation where people could gather and be part of it. And secondly, I mean, just the obvious. I think, and I'm a group person, and I think, learning music one-to-one is great. I think if there were opportunities for people to learn in a group, and it could be all those modalities that you talked about, because I believe that same thing. That people were given an opportunity to come together once a week, and whether it's ukulele or guitar or flute or drumming. I mean, drumming's great because you can get a decent sound. Like pick up the violin, try to get a good sound. Pretty hard. Most of us can hit a drum.
Community with the drum circle.
Exactly, and I studied some drumming in Brazil and in Cuba and Jamaica, and it's like these traditional rhythms. They're just such a part of the healing fabric of those communities, and they're not that hard to pick up.
Okay, so I will have a drum for you the next time you
Good.
come to see me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to Dick and Bob and Kelly Ray. It's been a terrific discussion, a terrific experience. And now we're going to take a few minutes and bring back our musicians, and we're going to have a little question and answer. Dick, don't go away. They can ask you questions. A little question and answer for all of these people, including Deb
All right.
and Judy. They'll be happy to answer questions as well.
And you guys are the questioners now.
Yeah, you
Yes.
ask the questions.
So we've
And,
got some microphones
Julia
down there.
McCormick, she's our president of CMA, has microphones. Brian Coyle. And let's bring back out Nicholas and Colin.
And Colin, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
We will flank you guys.
Beautiful.
I think somebody said something bad
So if you
about a
raise your
violin
hand,
while
they
you
will
were
bring
off
you a
stage.
microphone.
Yeah.
My mother had just gone into hospice, and she was fading quickly. And the music therapist that I had met in the hall happened to be a classmate of my daughter's in high school. And she said, "Mrs. Ryder?" And I thought, nobody calls me Mrs. Ryder, but she did. And so it was towards the end of the day on a Friday, and she said, "Well, I'll be back on Monday." And I thought, well, fat chance, I'm not sure we'll be here. But she came about 4 o'clock and brought her keyboard, and she asked, what did my mother like? And Mother had been pretty incommunicado for some time now. And I said, well, she likes Bach. So she played some Bach on her keyboard. And then without any conversation, she began to sing Ave Maria. And when she finished that, my mother opened her eyes and said, "Thank you, that's one of my favorite songs." And that was the last thing Mom ever spoke. And it just made the whole process so easy, so much easier. And I knew that she was heading off to where she needed with Ave Maria.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a particular question or kind of get your reaction to. For me, in trying to, before getting to the chemotherapy and the surgery and for the radiation therapy, I found on YouTube a type of music that played music, but it also had frequency in it. And I remember I had to go for a PET scan, and I'm a diabetic. And of course I was nervous, and it made my blood sugar go up. And they said, "I'm sorry, the doctor said it has to be at 160, and it was at 200 and something. And I went, okay. So I said, let me try something. Give me 10 minutes, and I put it on, and it was actually on YouTube saying frequency music to lower your blood sugar. And she said she watched me, and she said, you were so relaxed, and so it had to be 160. So I envisioned that to happen. And so when she checked my blood, she just looked shocked, and I go, what's wrong? And she goes, it's at 160. This is amazing. And I said, thank you. Then we can do the PET scan. She goes, yeah, but I want to take you to a casino next time. Because you got something going here. And I go, I'm not that good. But have you come across something like that? Have you thought of using that in therapy? Music as well? There's something about frequency?
Well, I'm also in training to be an EMDR therapist. So eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, right? And we're not sure why, but it's research-backed that any kind of bilateral stimulation is going to regulate you. If it's strumming, even if it's just talking in a regular,
Therapists have a type of voice that they use. It's a very musical tool to use to calm us.
So specifically that, I don't know. I don't have any training in that, but I do know that we're rhythmic creatures, and rhythm settles us, grounds us.
So Nicholas or Colin, how would you go about writing music to lower blood sugar?
Well, just what you just said is the power of repetition, which is one of the key elements of any kind of music, is either repeating something or thwarting the expectation if you want to increase drama, right? But there's so much of so-called minimalist music, Philip Glass, who we've played a lot of his quartets, or Steve Reich, where that idea of repetition and slowly changing, to mimic natural processes. And also coming from a Buddhist state, Philip Glass is a Buddhist, I think, and that idea of repetition or mantra, and actually you talk about any religious tradition, chanting is such a thing, and it puts you in a state of mind, of reverence, of calm acceptance, or whatever it is. So.
And the other thing that you did is you put out an intention, right? And when we put out a specific intention, the music just enhances our ability to get there, maybe. So, very interesting. A lot science can't explain. And, in our scientific world, we want explanations for everything, but we don't have those. And the reason we don't have those is we can't measure them at this point. But someday we will be able to. So thank you for that great story, because it was really motivating for other people. An intention accentuated by the music got you to where you needed to be.
Another question from the audience? Right back
Yes.
there.
Go ahead.
And this is not a personal story, but I really want to thank you all for being here. And there's this common theme of human connection in this music and healing. And what really comes to mind to me is that, and maybe it's an exploration and discussion of what really healing is and how our connectedness with each other, and music being that vibrational energy in which that's conducted through, but really that exploration on how do we heal as human beings, and maybe that has some resonance on why music is one of those modalities that aids us in it. So I'm curious to hear what the panelists have to say about what really is healing and how we as humans heal and maybe heal together.
That's great, and even the concept of healing. So, in the world of cancer, not everyone can be cured, but everyone can be healed. So what does healing mean? Maybe come over here to Deb. And Deb, I know that I feel a sense of calm, and I would use the word healing when I am in the presence of your music. I'm not thumping my toes. I'm not singing along to Tina Turner. I am finding a peace and calm that I would describe as healing. What do you think about the word healing, and how does your practice, do you think, help bring that about?
Well, I look at healing as something that each one of us can do from within. All of the doctors and therapists and musicians can help with that. But it's helping to hold a space for you where you can go within and connect with inner peace and calmness and feel your feelings. I think healing comes through feeling. So a lot of illness, I think, is caused by stress-related incidents. I think it's when we can't look at our feelings and accept them. And so if we can get into a place where we can feel what we're feeling, look at that, and then be at peace and acceptance with it, I think that's what healing is about for me.
Thanks.
I think of healing in much the same way. And the point that you made about the connection, I think is so apt. Back in the early 1990s, I studied all manner of modalities, Reiki and quantum healing and healing touch. And I could go on, but I discovered that the energy that flowed through me was the same energy, no matter which method I was using. And it was this, deep, infinitely compassionate love. And I think that that is the most healing power in the world.
There we go. Compassion, love, healing. Bob, how would you answer that? What's healing to you?
Well, it's healing to me. Well, let me just throw out one thing, too, about the group. The most graphic example to me is meditating by myself versus meditating with 100 people. I mean, it's just such a different experience. What's healing to me? Yeah, it's the pathway, right? It's maybe it's like the old Greek thing about the arrow never getting the tree. You're just trying to move forward. You're trying to affirm and visualize yourself on an upward trajectory rather than a downward.
Kelly?
So when I'm working with clients, I think what healing is for what I'm trying to do is, it looks like being present with who's in the space. If it's end of life, it's usually the most important people to you in the world are there with you. How can I help the people in the space be present for each other?
Nicholas?
I don't know that I have an answer for you, and I think I agree with everything that's been said in some part from my experience, and yet I don't know what it is, and I just think maybe that's it for me. Actually, healing is a bit of a mystery, and I think actually we need to embrace the idea. I think that's what all creative arts at the end of the day do, is actually embrace a mystery in our life, in a way that actually can't be encapsulated by normal quotidian experience, and the things that we do on a daily basis. We're actually trying to reach a place where we might not be currently, a place beyond somehow, and so somehow it's part of a journey that is always trying to get there somehow. So that's maybe a little bit of how I see it.
Colin?
Hard to add, but I love that this idea of visualizing, and that's what the creative spirit is about, is you are the gap between where you are and where you want to be, whether that's in the piece of music or in one's life, and then the problem solving, as you said, of how to get there, and even actually then within that uncertain journey, being flexible enough to follow the detour where it will go.
So Andy, how do we bring compassion and love into the Cancer Center?
By demonstrating, we're leaders, right? To me, you lead by example. And that's my bottom line. I lead my Cancer Center by example. So I try and show kindness, love, compassion to anybody who walks through the door, whether it's, the homeless person, richest person in the world. It makes no difference. Every human is worth working with.
Yep.
And that's how I lead, by example.
Great. Yeah, when there's two human beings in the room together, there's the opportunity for compassion.
Yeah, we've lost, in these last couple of years, there's just been so much side-taking, vitriol, and it doesn't do any of us any good from a humanistic aspect. I mean, it creates stress and anxiety, it creates disease, and all we have to do is simply be kind. Love one another as if you wanted yourself to be loved. And that's the bottom line. And I think music does that in such a powerful way, because the people who created music, whether it's Beethoven, whether it's our contemporary composers, did it out of this deep sense of love and compassion for the human spirit, I think.
And I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes from the Dalai Lama. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Yeah. And what goes around comes around, and just like a hug, it works in both directions. How are we doing time-wise, Andy?
We're going to have to wrap this session up.
I thought so.
I want to keep on task because, I want to be respectful of everyone's time here.
Well, you're doing that with great compassion, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I could have just yanked you off the stage, but no, thank you. So, thank all of you for your questions, for your attention, and I really want to thank the panelists. You guys have done a terrific job expressing yourselves and really opening yourselves up. This can be vulnerable, and how you've expressed yourselves has really, I think, helped the audience understand where this healing comes from. Just an interesting story. I was talking to Kelly Ray before, and she and Colin have actually worked together before. In another life. So
in Brooklyn in 2009, I think we performed at the World Trade Center, and Karen Coonrod's More or Less I Am.
Yes.
So see, we are all interconnected.
My old life is now intersected.
Yes.
Yes.
The words of Walt Whitman, who had a lot of compassion.
Yeah.
So there's just a great small world story, and just the power of music and bringing all of us together. So thank you to all of you for being here. And I'm going to let you go because you've got a little tuning up to do. And I now want to introduce Deb and Judy. They've been over here quietly waiting for their chance in the sun. And they are going to give you about 10 minutes worth of healing tones. But I want to just say a little bit about each. So Deb Jennings, she's a fixture here in Des Moines. Anybody who's been in the healing community knows Deb Jennings. She's got bowls. How many of these bowls do you have?
I don't know. I'd have to take inventory.
Really? Thousands?
No, not that many.
Okay. All right.
Several rooms full.
All right. But Deb she plays multiple instruments, including the crystal and alchemical bowls. She has studied around with healing experts such as Jonathan Goldman. So any of you who know about sound therapy, Jonathan Goldman's sort of the guru of sound therapy. She studied with Jonathan Goldman's Buddhist monks in Tibet, China, and India. She's a teacher. She leads healing sound sessions throughout the community. And her goal is just to vibrate unconditional love and wellness to people. What could be better than that, right?
I love it.
Yeah. So thank you for being here, Deb.
Thank you.
And Judy Olsen, she's an author, artist, healer. She uses music and song along with other modalities to heal in her work. She loves to share the gift of Native American flute, which is intended for celebration and healing. So we're going to hear from them. And I want you to think, as we go through this next 10 to 15 minutes, you heard several people use the word feeling. So we listen to music as something to listen to, but I really want each of you to get into a state, almost a meditative state, and feel the music. Feel what that music is doing to your body. Is it relaxing it? Is it giving you goosebumps? Because when we feel, we then incorporate that into our mind. So it's more than listening. Music is something that we should feel. So, Deb and Judy, it's all yours.
So we're going to take some of those concepts we just talked about and do a little guided meditation with the music for you. So if you want to get really comfortable in the chair that you are in and let it support you, let your body begin to relax. Let any stressors from your day go and just sink into that chair and let it support you. And then bring your awareness to your breath. Following the breath in and out of the body. And then we also talked about intention, and Jonathan Goldman said that intention and the frequency of the instruments bring about the healing process. So have an intention for this next few minutes, whether it's just to relax, to become more peaceful or calm, more loving or kind with yourself, or if there's something in particular that you're wanting to release or create, just make that intention right now. Picture it in your mind, visualize that like we talked about, and trust that that intention's being heard and created for you now. And then place the focus of your awareness on the sounds and just follow them. And notice and observe without any judgment how you're feeling as you follow those sounds. And if you get distracted, just bring your attention back to following the sounds. You're not doing anything wrong if you get distracted. Our mind likes to distract us. So we just notice and observe that without judgment and bring our awareness back to following the sounds and going deeper within now.
Knowing that healing is the feeling of oneness that you have with everything and everyone around you, where you drop all of the obstacles. If there is any discomfort anywhere in your body, bring your attention to that right now and bring your awareness to a place of gentleness and tenderness and just complete acceptance, if you can. I'm going to play 3 different flutes today. One of them flutes are like people. They all have a very distinct voice. And the first one I'm going to play is kind of in the middle range. The second one has a very high, bright, angelic sound. And the last one has a very deep, resonant, earthy tone. And at some point when I'm playing that one, Deb is going to add the crystal bowls to that, and at some point after that, we'll add some voice. So with that in mind, here we go.
awareness back to your body and back to your breath. And breathing in that unconditional love we were talking about, and breathing out gratitude for this time to take care of yourself today. And feeling balanced, aligned, centered, and grounded. Gradually become aware of your surroundings again. And feeling refreshed and restored and renewed. Let these vibrations take you through the rest of your day. Thank you.
I feel like I should whisper.
I am so deeply grateful for this opportunity to share.
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to talk. Seriously. I don't know about you, but I was just mesmerized. I don't want to come back. I really don't. So thank you for that powerful, powerful demonstration of what vibration and frequency can do. Cool. I'm not going to whisper the whole time now. I just want to thank all of you for being here today. This has been an amazing demonstration. We do have one more thing left, so don't get up and go. But I do want to announce tonight the Civic Music Association is going to be bringing the concert to Hoyt Sherman, Brooklyn Rider, Healing Modes. So at 7:30 this evening, come back here and hear the entire Healing Modes program. They'll be playing the complete Beethoven number 15 string quartet in A minor, as well as 3 contemporary pieces composed by contemporary composers commissioned. Be here at 7:30. It'll be an amazing experience. Now, the last part of our program is Brooklyn Rider has agreed to perform one movement of the Beethoven quartet. And I'm going to reintroduce Brooklyn Rider. They've been called the rock stars of classical music. But I can guarantee they will not be smashing their instruments on stage. Healing Modes has been called the intersection between music and healthfulness. They're an amazing, amazing group of musicians, composers, and really genuinely wonderful human beings. They've been all over the world. They work with luminaries such as Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Project. They've done extraordinary work. They've collaborated with many names that you would all know. So it's my pleasure to introduce right now Brooklyn Rider. Thank you.